I was halfway through rolling the second barrel of sealant up to the trail when I heard the unmistakable crunch of wedge heels on gravel. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Only one woman in our HOA had the gall to wear heels to a lake cabin community. Sharon Lexington. "Frederick," she barked like she owned the place. "What do you think you're doing?" I stood up straight, wiped my hands on my jeans, and turned to face her. Yep, there she was, blonde bob, oversized sunglasses, clipboard clutched like it was a holy relic. "Sealing the trail, Sharon," I said calmly. "It's overdue. The runoff's been eroding it for months." Her jaw tightened. "You can't just do that without HOA approval. That trail is common property." "No, it's not," I said, pointing behind her. "The trail starts on my land, runs the length of my property, and ends right behind my shed. It's been like that since my dad built this cabin in '87. I've got the deed and plat maps to prove it." Sharon narrowed her eyes. "That trail connects to the community lake. It's part of our shared access. You can't seal it off." "I'm not sealing it off, I'm sealing it. Maintenance. So people stop twisting their ankles and tracking mud into the water. But since I'm paying for it, I figured I'd put a gate up top, just to keep the ADVs off." That's when she lost it. "You're trying to privatize community land. That's theft, Frederick. I'm calling the sheriff." I shrugged. "Go ahead, I'll keep working." She stormed off, furiously tapping on her phone. I rolled out the second barrel and started brushing the sealant into the edges. 10 minutes later, I heard the sound of tires on gravel again, this time a sheriff's cruiser. Deputy Madsen stepped out, sunglasses already on, looking more annoyed than concerned. Sharon practically lunged at him. "That man," she shrieked, pointing at me like I'd just robbed a bank, "is illegally modifying HOA property. He threatened to restrict access to the lake." "That trail is for everyone," the deputy raised a hand. "Ma'am, I'm gonna need to see your ID." That shut her up for a second. "What? Why me?" "I got a call about a property dispute. I need to know who I'm talking to." "I'm the HOA president," she snapped, digging through her purse. "I still need ID, ma'am." I couldn't help but glance up from my work. She fumbled with her wallet like it was a grenade. The deputy walked over to me next. "You got proof this trail's on your land?" "Yep." I reached into my truck, pulled out a folder, and handed him the documents. "Deed, survey, and a letter from the county zoning office. All current, the trail's on my parcel." He flipped through it, nodded slowly. "Looks in order. You're sealing, not blocking?" "Correct. I'll add signage once it's dry, just for safety, and a gate to keep the off-roaders out." "Locals can ask for the code." He looked over at Sharon, who was now huffing like she'd just run a mile. "Ma'am, unless you've got legal documentation that says otherwise, I can't stop him." Her voice went up an octave. "But this is HOA property?" "Not according to the records." "Unless you've got something that contradicts his deed, this is his land. You can't interfere." She looked like she was going to explode. Deputy Madsen handed me back the folder with a nod, then turned to Sharon, who was still clutching her clipboard like it was going to save her from drowning. Her jaw was clenched, so tight you'd think I'd paved over her flower bed. "Ma'am, I'd advise you to step back and let this man finish his work. You're on private property at this point, and unless you've got legal grounds to challenge his documents, you're trespassing." She blinked, stunned into silence for the first time since she'd arrived. Then, like flipping a switch, her voice dropped into something syrupy and calculated. "Deputy, what if I told you the HOA has an easement here? That we've used this trail for years, decades, even. Doesn't that give us some kind of permanent right?" He didn't even flinch. "You can file a civil claim if you believe there's an easement. But unless that easement is legally recorded, it doesn't change the fact that this is his land. You can't enforce something that doesn't exist on paper." Sharon opened her mouth to argue, but he'd already turned back toward his cruiser. She stood there, seething, before finally spinning on her heel and stomping off. The heels didn't sound nearly as authoritative on the way back. I gave it another hour before I installed the gate. Welded steel posts, cemented just off the edge of the trailhead. I didn't bolt the gate shut. I wasn't trying to keep neighbors out, just the weekend warriors who tore up the trail with their four-wheelers. I hung a weatherproof sign. Trail under maintenance. Contact owner for access. By the next morning, my phone had 6 voicemails from neighbors. All of them confused, a few annoyed, one downright apologetic. "Hey Fred, I heard Sharon said you closed the trail for good. Just wanted to check before I say anything at the next meeting. You know, in case she's stretching things." That was how it started. Then came the door knocks. First it was Mike, the retired firefighter from 3 cabins down. "She's telling everyone you're blocking emergency lake access," he said, frowning. "That true?" "Nope," I said, handing him a copy of the same zoning map I'd shown the deputy. "Trails open to foot traffic." "I'm just stopping vehicle damage. And no one ever designated this as emergency access. It's not even connected to the main fire route." He studied the map for a long moment, then let out a low whistle. "She's gonna hate this." "She already does." That evening, I swung by the community message board near the lake launch and saw half a dozen new flyers. All printed, bold red letters screaming about illegal gate installation and community lockout. At the bottom was Sharon's email, inviting people to a special emergency HOA meeting at her place that Saturday. I tore one off and stuffed it in my pocket. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. A few neighbors I normally waved to were suddenly cold, barely returning a nod. Others gave me the kind of look you reserve for someone who borrowed your chainsaw and never gave it back. I kept sealing the trail, finishing the last stretch by the creek bend, and installed a few solar lights to line the edge. Nothing fancy. Just enough so someone didn't wander off the path at dusk and twist an ankle. I even left a laminated note on the gate with my number, saying I'd unlock it for anyone who needed access for fishing or walking the dog. Then Saturday came. I wasn't planning to attend Sharon's impromptu meeting. But when Mike showed up at my door holding a battered manila envelope and looking more serious than I'd ever seen him, I knew I had to. "You need to see this," he said without even a hello. The envelope was from the county clerk's office. Inside were copies of 2 quitclaim deeds, both filed within the last year. One of them transferred a narrow strip of land exactly 12 feet wide, running behind my property into the HOA's name. The second showed Sharon's signature as the seller. I stared at the papers, my stomach tightening. "That can't be right," I said. "I never sold anything, and that land's been in my family since the original platting." Mike nodded. "I figured something was off. I was in the fire marshal's office last week and saw a new map on the wall. It had a new access corridor marked, right through your lot." I asked for a copy. He handed me another sheet. There it was. A dotted line labeled Community Access Easement, stamped just 3 months ago. My pulse started to hammer. This wasn't just HOA overreach. They'd filed fraudulent documents. And the map stamped and recorded meant they were planning something big. "They're trying to force an easement through my land," I said aloud. "No," Mike said, voice hard. "They already did." "Question is, do you want to bring this up at the meeting or go straight to the sheriff?" I didn't answer right away. The meeting was already underway when we arrived. Sharon's house was packed, probably 30 people wedged into her living room and spilling onto the porch. She was standing at the front, gesturing wildly with her clipboard, a stack of what looked like petitions in her other hand. "And that's why we have to take action now. We can't let one person endanger access for everyone else. This is about community rights." Someone near the back spotted me and nudged the woman beside him. Heads turned like dominoes. I stepped forward, holding up the fake deed. "Funny thing about rights," I said. "They don't include forging land transfers." Sharon froze. Her eyes darted to the paper in my hand, then to Mike behind me. She looked like a poker player caught dealing from the bottom of the deck. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said quickly. "That's confidential HOA documentation." "No," I said, stepping up to the coffee table. "This is a county filing, and unless you can explain how my name got removed from the deed without my signature, you've got a serious problem." Gasps rippled through the room. Someone in the back said, "Wait, is that real?" Mike held up the zoning map. They tried to force a public easement through private land, filed it as if they bought the land legally, but no check was written, no witness signatures, just a quitclaim with a forged seller line. Sharon's face had gone ghost white. I suggest everyone here think twice before signing her petition, I added. Because if you support a fraudulent land grab, you're part of the liability. It was dead silent for a beat. Then a man near the front, Frank, the retired city planner, stood up. I'd like to make a motion, he said. Effective immediately, that the HOA board be suspended pending legal review. Sharon sputtered. You can't, we can, he said calmly. Bylaws, Article 7, Section 3, emergency vote to suspend officers in the event of suspected criminal activity. Hands shot up, one by one. By the time it got to me, the count was 22. Only 3 didn't raise theirs. Sharon, her husband, and one of her long-time friends, Frank, turned to me. I'll call the sheriff first thing Monday. You should get a lawyer. If what you're holding is real, and it looks real, there's going to be fallout. I nodded. Already have one on speed dial. Sharon didn't say another word. She just stood there, surrounded by the people she'd once controlled, as her carefully built little empire crumbled around her. And I hadn't even finished sealing the trail. By Monday morning, the fallout was already in full swing. I was sitting at my kitchen table, coffee going cold beside a half-eaten bagel, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed County Recorder's Office. I answered, expecting some bureaucratic runaround. Instead, I got a woman named Angela who spoke in a clipped, no-nonsense tone. Mr. Lorne, we've reviewed the quitclaim paperwork involving your parcel. There are multiple discrepancies, and based on the forged signature, it's being escalated to the district attorney's office for formal investigation. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. You're confirming it was forged? Yes, sir. Your signature doesn't match any previous filings. There was no witness, no notary seal, and no payment verification. We've already flagged both documents and notified the legal department. Does that mean criminal charges? We can't say for certain yet, but forgery of a land deed is felony territory. Someone's in a lot of trouble. I thanked her and hung up. The walls of Sharon's little fiefdom weren't just cracking, they were collapsing at the foundation. 2 hours later, a dark blue sedan rolled up my gravel driveway. Out stepped a man in a tailored gray suit, briefcase in one hand, badge clipped to his belt. He introduced himself as Detective Gregson from the county's Financial Crimes Unit. Mind if I come in for a few minutes? He asked. Sure, come on in, I said, already clearing space at the table. He set the briefcase down and pulled out a spiral notebook and a digital recorder. You're not under investigation, Mr. Lorne, but you're a key witness and we're moving quickly on this. Do you know if anyone else within the HOA was aware of the falsified deed? No idea, I said. But Sharon was the one who signed it. And from what I've learned, she was telling neighbors the trail belonged to the HOA before anything was ever filed. He nodded, jotting a few notes. Did she ever approach you directly about selling any portion of your land? Never. Last we spoke about anything related to the trail, I told her it ran across my property. That was months ago. She didn't like it, but that was the end of it, or so I thought. Did she have access to your personal documents or any old paperwork? Not unless she broke into my cabin. I keep everything locked up, and the originals are still in my safe. He leaned back. We've already subpoenaed her financials and electronic communications. If she coordinated this with others, we'll find out. I handed him the copy of the zoning map Mike had given me and the signed petition from the emergency meeting. He folded them neatly and slid them into a folder. There's a good chance this isn't just forgery. If she used that fake deed to influence county zoning decisions and lobbied for that access corridor, we're talking about fraud at the county level. That's a different kind of heat. Once he left, I drove down to the trail. The sealant had cured perfectly. The gate stood undisturbed and a few neighbors were walking their dogs along the path, nodding politely as they passed. One of them, a woman named Greta who'd always kept to herself, stopped and looked me over carefully. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," she said. "I signed a complaint last week about the gate. Sharon made it sound like you were walling us off. I should have asked you first." I nodded. "No hard feelings. I know how persuasive she can be. But from now on, if anyone has questions about the trail, I'll make sure the information's out in the open." She smiled briefly. "We're lucky you didn't just shut it down completely. Some might have." As she walked away, I realized that was exactly what Sharon had counted on me reacting out of spite. She had set a trap hoping I'd overreach, act unreasonably, and give her something real to use against me. But I hadn't. And now the truth was unraveling faster than she could spin it. By Thursday, things escalated again. The sheriff's department executed a search warrant at Sharon's home. I didn't hear about it from the news, I saw it. 3 cruisers and an unmarked SUV pulled up mid-morning. Deputies went inside with gloves and boxes. Her husband stood on the porch, arms crossed, face blank, word spread like wildfire. By sundown, screenshots were circulating from a community group, chat apparently one Sharon had used to coordinate HOA votes without official meetings. She'd been pressuring board members to approve zoning requests she hadn't even disclosed to residents. At the next scheduled HOA meeting, held in the rec lodge instead of Sharon's house, the mood was tense but electric. Frank, now acting president until new elections could be held, stood up front with a folder thick with documents. "I've reviewed the last 2 years of HOA expenditures," he said. "There are over 40 checks signed by Sharon without proper board approval, landscaping invoices that don't match any visible work, payments to a company listed under her cousin's name. We're contacting a forensic accountant." A low murmur rippled through the crowd. I sat near the back, arms crossed, watching as the community finally began to understand just how deep the rot went. "I've also spoken with the county attorney," Frank continued. "If this investigation leads to criminal charges, the HOA can file a civil suit to recover any misused funds. We're not letting this slide." Someone toward the front, a younger guy I didn't recognize, raised his hand. "Can we vote to dissolve the entire HOA, start fresh, or at least scale it back?" Frank hesitated, then nodded. "There's a legal process for that. We'd need a supermajority 80% of homeowners, but yes, it's possible. And after what we've uncovered, it may be time." When the meeting ended, people didn't rush out the way they usually did. They lingered, talked in small groups, compared notes. For the first time in years, I saw neighbors actually listening to each other instead of just posturing. Outside, under the old lodge awning, Mike caught up with me. "She's finished," he said. "DA's office confirmed they're filing charges next week. Forgery, fraud, misuse of public trust." "It's gonna be ugly. She have any allies left?" He shook his head. "Only people too embarrassed to admit they backed her, but the tide's turned. You did more than just fix a trail, Fred. You cleared a path for the rest of us." I didn't say anything right away. Just looked out at the gravel lot where people were still talking in the dusk light, no longer divided by suspicion or manipulated by fear. "Never thought sealing a trail would lead to all this," I finally said. Mike laughed. "Sometimes it starts with a brush and a bucket. Sometimes that's all it takes to uncover everything rotten underneath." A week later, the arrest warrant was issued. Sharon was taken in without incident, but the story made the local paper and even got picked up by a regional housing rights blog. The headline read, "HOA President Charged in Land Forgery Scheme, Lake Community Fights Back." I kept the clipping. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder, because real power doesn't come from a clipboard or a title or even a gate key. It comes from knowing your rights, standing your ground, and refusing to be silenced. Sharon had built her little empire on fear and manipulation. But in the end, it was undone by simple truth, and a trail that refused to be claimed. The courthouse smelled like old ink and floor wax, the kind of place where time didn't pass so much as settle. I sat near the back of the hearing room, watching as Sharon's attorney whispered something into her ear. She looked thinner than she had at the emergency meeting, shoulders hunched, hair dull. Her usual armor of confidence replaced with a stiff, uncomfortable silence. Across from her, the county prosecutor shuffled a stack of exhibits. The judge, a stern woman with tightly pinned silver hair, tapped her gavel once to begin. The room quieted instantly. This pre-trial hearing concerns allegations of document forgery, fraudulent conveyance of property, and misappropriation of HOA funds. Defendant Sharon Lexington is present with counsel. Mr. Braddock, are you ready to proceed? Her attorney rose, buttoning his jacket. Yes, Your Honor. We request that the charges of misappropriation be separated from the forgery charge for clarity. The prosecutor didn't even look up. We object. These actions were part of a coordinated scheme. All charges stem from the same chain of events. The judge flipped through her notes. Objection sustained. Charges will remain consolidated. Sharon didn't react. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table in front of her, hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. I wasn't here for revenge. I'd already had that when the gate stayed up and the trail stayed mine. I was here to see this through, to make sure she didn't weasel out of it on a technicality or plea away the damage she'd done. When the exhibits were presented, the room shifted. It wasn't just dry paperwork. The prosecutor had pulled every thread. A bank ledger showing HOA payments routed to a shell landscaping company. The zoning request emails where Sharon claimed community ownership of the trail. And a scanned copy of the quitclaim deed with a signature claiming to be mine, except the handwriting looped like a completely different hand. The prosecutor walked the court through each piece with the precision of a surgeon. The forged deed was used to influence county zoning maps and reclassify Mr. Lorne's private property as a public corridor. No payment was made. No legal transaction occurred. The intent was to seize land by bureaucratic manipulation, bypassing both the property owner and the community itself. Sharon's lawyer tried to object. My client believed she had verbal consent. Objection. The prosecutor cut in. She told the board the land had been donated. Not verbally offered, donated, and she filed the deed herself. The judge raised a hand. Noted. Continue. The second half of the hearing focused on the money the checks made out to vendors that didn't exist, the HOA dues that vanished into beautification projects that were never completed, the contractor invoices signed by Sharon's cousin, who had since moved to Arizona and wasn't returning calls. I leaned forward slightly when the prosecutor brought up the final exhibit, audio from a voicemail left on a board member's phone. You're either with me or against me, Sharon's voice snapped through the speaker. If this trail thing goes sideways, it's on the board. You want the community turning on you, because I won't take the fall alone. The judge paused the audio. Is this corroborated? The prosecutor nodded. The board member provided the original file. It matches the defendant's voice print, and the timestamp aligns with the date the zoning map was updated. Her attorney stood again, but this time with a different tone. Your Honor, we'd like to request a continuance to negotiate a plea deal. No, the judge said flatly. We've heard enough for today. This case is moving to trial. Bail remains revoked. The gavel came down. Sharon's eyes finally lifted. For a moment, she looked directly at me. No rage, no pretense, just a hollow kind of disbelief, like she still couldn't understand how it had come to this. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. Autumn was creeping in early this year, and the breeze coming off the lake carried the first bite of it. Frank was waiting for me beside the courthouse steps, holding a folder under his arm. They're calling for a full audit of the HOA, he said. Every invoice, every vendor, county oversight committees stepping in until we re-elect a board. I nodded. Good, that needed to happen. He glanced back toward the building. You know, she tried to pin the entire land scheme on the old zoning clerk. Said he misfiled the easement and she just went along with it. Too bad the clerk retired 6 months before the deed was filed, I said. Frank gave a low chuckle. Yeah, that didn't go over well in court. We walked to the lot together. People were starting to treat me differently now, not just as the guy who'd stood his ground, but as someone they could trust. I didn't ask for that. I just wanted my land left alone. But sometimes, when one person pushes back, it gives the rest of them the courage to do the same. Over the next few weeks, the neighborhood changed in ways I hadn't expected. The emergency board voted to suspend all discretionary spending until the audit was complete. The lake trail was officially declared private, but with a community use agreement I drafted myself simple language, clear boundaries, and a sign and sheet on a weatherproof clipboard hanging by the gate. No one complained. The new board elections brought in people I'd never seen involved before: a retired nurse, a local teacher, and a guy who ran a bait shop on the far side of the lake. They weren't interested in power. They just wanted things fair. That was enough. As for Sharon, the trial took less than a week. She pled guilty to felony forgery and misuse of HOA funds, hoping for leniency. The judge gave her 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and ordered restitution of the misappropriated dues. It wasn't prison, but it was public. Her name was printed in the local paper again, this time beneath the words, "Convicted guilty." I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. Instead, I spent the morning resealing the last bend of the trail just ahead of the shoreline where the trees opened up to a perfect view of the lake. The sun was rising slow and gold over the water, casting long shadows across the path. A few neighbors passed by, offering quiet nods or a quick thanks before continuing on. At the edge of the trail, the gate stood as solid as the day I installed it. The keypad box was freshly painted, the code changed, and a new laminated sheet listed instructions for access: clear, fair, and signed with my full name. It wasn't about control. It never had been. It was about keeping one thing honest in a place where things had gotten twisted. About reminding people that land isn't something you steal with paper and a pen. It's something you respect. And now, for the first time in a long while, that respect worked both ways.